Okay, it doesn't look much like a helicopter yet, but this section will get us started. We're going to start by mounting the landing gear to the skid tubes, the airframe to the landing gear, and then the body support pads get installed, and we are going to fabricate the battery strap. We're also going to put the skid end plugs in. Now this section is very important to set up the airframe on the landing gear correctly. And we're going to reference the square tubes fore and aft and laterally for that setup. So I want to take your time and don't rush this. Measure many times and then cut your holes. In addition, you'll notice in the video that I will use toggle clamps back here to hold these two brackets rather than C-clamps. They hold a little better and they don't get in the way when you drill the holes. I cannot stress enough how important it is to set the airframe up on the landing gear. So take your time, be patient, measure a couple times before you cut the holes. So let's get started.
Refer to the Construction Manual, Section 2 for components and prints. Located on each side of the airframe near the front are bushings for the landing gear attachments. Open the bushings to a letter D size drill. Start with smaller drills. Use a letter D reamer to final size the hole with cutting oil. It will be necessary to shorten the bushings to attach the front landing gear. Do not shorten the bushings on the inside of the airframe at this time. You can, however, trim the outside bushings. Use a hacksaw to cut the bushings. Allow at least 1/8 of an inch of the bushing to extend past the weld, as shown. Use a file to square the ends of the bushings. The ends of all bushings must be 90 degrees to the hole. Use a 1/4 inch bolt to verify the ends of the bushings. The head of the bolt must contact the end of the bushing all the way around. Check the ends of the tail boom support tubes. Radius the corner if necessary to provide the proper clearance. At this time, remove the tail boom support tubes from the airframe. Note, the 3/8 inch nut bolts securing the support tubes use a 3/8 inch regular nut. This is temporary, and these nuts are used during the early parts of the assembly. After the engine is installed, you'll be instructed to install the lock nuts located on the airframe part card. Lay the skid tubes out as shown. Note, the rear end of the skid tubes have the smallest bend. Make sure the front of the skid tube on the passenger side has the steel insert. Using a tape measure, place a mark 15 3/4 inch from both ends of the rear skid tubes. Mount the rear landing gear on the skids so that the rear edge of the shoe is on the mark. Leave the clamp loose enough so you can rotate the skid. Now adjust the skids so the turned up ends of the skids are parallel and not leaning in or out. Tighten the hose clamp and check that the skid tube and shoe have a proper fit. To find the location of the front landing gear, locate and mark on both skid tubes 42 inches from the front edge of the rear landing gear shoes. Mount the front landing gear on the skids by placing the rear edge of the shoe on the marks. Hold the gear in position with hose clamps. Note, the 42-inch measurement is an approximate position. The exact position will be determined by the alignment of the brackets and the airframe position. You'll notice the skid tubes are closer together in the rear than in the front. This is normal. This allows for spread when the gear supports the entire weight of the helicopter. Check the skids are level laterally and fore and aft. Use shims as necessary. Lift the airframe and place it on the landing gear. It will be necessary to use toggle clamps and shims to position the proper clearance of the rear brackets. With the rear brackets clamped into position, verify the position of the front bushings with relation to the front gear bracket. If necessary, move the front landing gear's position slightly on the skid tubes to clock and/or center the airframe on the landing gear. Mark the bushings and cut the inside length of the bushings for a snug fit that centers the airframe between the brackets. The airframe's tubing must not contact the front landing gear tubing. To cut the bushings, tilt the airframe up. Again, bushings must be square to the hole. Use a file as necessary and check that the head of the bolt makes contact all the way around. It's very important that the complete load of the helicopter airframe is only on the bolts and not resting on the landing gear tubes. The objective here is to obtain the proper alignment of the square tubes. The fore-aft square drive tube shown here should have a forward tilt of 3 to 4 degrees. The rear square drive tube shown here must be level laterally. For the rear bracket only, use shims of a minimum of 20 thousandths to no more than 1/4 of an inch to achieve proper angles. If you have to shim more than 1/4 of an inch on the rear brackets, contact Rotorway's technical support before proceeding further. Note, position of the front airframe bushings as necessary to achieve the correct fore and aft square tube angle. Before drilling any holes, verify the skids are level and check the angles on the square drive tubes. When satisfied with the alignment, first drill the two 3/8 inch holes that secure the rear bracket to the rear landing gear. Start with a sharp 3/8 inch drill and use the airframe hole as a template. Drill only enough to mark the center of the hole. Now use a number 10 drill bit to drill a pilot hole. Open the hole with a 3/8 inch drill bit. Final size the hole with a reamer and deburr the hole. Important: before drilling the front bracket holes, install the tail boom support tubes. With the tubes installed, check and verify the 4-aft square drive tube. Adjust the front of the airframe as necessary for proper 4-aft square drive tube angle of 3 to 4 degrees before drilling. Drill the front bracket holes with a letter D bit. Use a reamer and deburr the holes. Locate and install the bolts. Note: to locate the correct bolt, reference the construction prints. The print will provide you with the correct rotaway part number to use when looking for it on the parts card. Now drill the holes for the 1/4 inch bolts that are located above the 3/8 inch bolts on the rear bracket. Start with the number 10 drill bit and then drill with the letter D bit. Use the reamer and deburr the holes. Fabricate a drill block to drill the holes in the skid shoe and skid tubes. Use a piece of 2x3 and cut the length to match the length of the landing gear shoe. Locate and drill 2 holes that are 1 inch from each end and 1 inch from the bottom of the block. Use a drill press to drill the 2 3/16 inch holes. On the rear shoe, carefully remove the hose clamp and place the drill block next to the shoe and clamp it into position. Before drilling, it's important to check the rotation of the skid tube. Drill the holes using a 3/16 inch bit as shown. Drill through the landing gear shoe and the skid tube on this side only. After drilling the outside holes, move the block to the inside and clamp it into place. Drill the holes from the inside. Remove the block and open the holes with a letter D bit. Use the reamer and deburr the holes before installing the 1/4 inch AN bolts. Use the same technique on the front landing gear shoes and install the bolts located on the parts card. Note, you'll need to form a radius in the block to fit the inside front landing gear. Clean the end of the skids and plugs, checking for burrs on anything that would prevent the plugs from being installed. Use a deburr tool to remove any burrs. Apply a coating of 2-part epoxy to skid end plug and skid tube. Epoxy is located on E09 card 4T.
Okay.
Install the plugs by driving them in with a large mallet or hammer and a block of wood until they are all the way into the shoulder of the plug. Referring to construction print E16-2000, locate and grind the 4 bushings in the front airframe cross tube so they extend about 1/4 of an inch above the tube. Because this bushing is chromoly and to prevent from breaking a tap, it's recommended to use a letter H drill bit to open the inside diameter before tapping. Then tap the 4 bushings with a 5/16 inch by 18 threads per inch tap. Use plenty of thread cutting oil when tapping. Install the body support adjustment pads into tapped bushings, using a 5/16 inch jam nut and washer on each. Determine the length and position of the holes for the retention strap. Use 3M weather stripping adhesive to glue the rubber to the steel strap. Use the battery to help determine the length of the 2 5/16 inch studs. With the supplied 5/16 inch lock nuts, install them as shown here.